If you have tried everything for your circulation, the compression socks, the leg elevation, the supplements, the exercises your doctor suggested, and your legs still feel cold, heavy, slow, and inadequate in ways that nothing has quite fixed, I want to tell you something. It is not because those things are wrong. Some of them genuinely help. It is because they are addressing symptoms while leaving the underlying cause of most age-related circulation decline completely untouched. That cause has a name. It lives inside the walls of your blood vessels. And after 60, it is declining in almost every person watching this, quietly, without a symptom specific enough to name it, in a way that no standard blood test measures. It is called nitric oxide. And when you understand what it does, and why the things you have been trying to address your circulation may be working around it rather than restoring it, the approach that actually works becomes clear. I am Dr. Mary, and today we are going inside the blood vessel walls to the one molecule that most circulation advice never mentions, and that most of the research says matters more than almost anything else. Your blood vessels are not passive tubes. They are living tissues, lined on the inside by a single layer of cells called the endothelium. And those endothelial cells are not just structural, they are chemically active. They produce a continuous stream of signaling molecules that tell your blood vessels whether to open, relax, and let blood flow, or to constrict, stiffen, and restrict it. The most important of those signaling molecules is nitric oxide. Endothelial nitric oxide is what relaxes the smooth muscle in your vessel walls. It is what allows your arteries to dilate when your muscles need more blood. It is what keeps your capillary beds, the tiny branching vessels in your leg muscles and skin, open, flexible, and responsive. When nitric oxide is abundant and your endothelium is functioning well, your circulation responds to what your body needs. Your legs warm appropriately, your muscles get what they need during activity. Your peripheral vessels open and close in the right rhythm with your heart and nervous system. When nitric oxide declines, and it declines significantly with age in a well-documented pattern that begins as early as your 40s, your vessels lose that responsiveness. They become stiffer and less able to dilate on demand. Your endothelium, starved of the signal it produces, begins a process called endothelial dysfunction. And your legs feel it first, because the peripheral circulation is the furthest from the heart and the most dependent on healthy endothelial signaling to function well. I want to tell you about a woman I will call Nadine. Nadine was 72. Her legs had been a problem for 6 years. Cold feet that no amount of warm socks resolved. A heaviness by afternoon that was not painful, but was exhausting in the way that something you cannot fix is exhausting. Circulation on Doppler ultrasound that was technically within normal range, but that every specialist who looked at her legs described as sluggish. No peripheral artery disease, no clots, no structural problem. She had tried compression stockings. They helped somewhat with the swelling. She elevated her legs at night. That helped somewhat with the heaviness. She walked every day, 20 minutes, sometimes 30. Her doctor was happy with her efforts. But after 6 years, Nadine's legs still felt fundamentally diminished, like they were operating at 60% of what they used to be, and nothing she or her doctors had tried had moved that number in any meaningful direction. Nobody had ever talked to her about her endothelium. Nobody had ever explained what nitric oxide was, or that it declines with age, or that there are specific evidence-based ways to support its production that go beyond the standard circulation advice she had already exhausted. Nadine's legs did not have a structural problem. They had a signaling problem. And signaling problems respond to different interventions than structural ones. Here's what happens to nitric oxide production as you age, and why it matters so directly for your legs. Nitric oxide is produced by an enzyme in your endothelial cells called endothelial nitric oxide synthase, ENOS. This enzyme converts the amino acid L-arginine into nitric oxide, which then diffuses into the smooth muscle of the vessel wall and causes it to relax. With age, two things happen simultaneously. First, ENOS activity declines. The enzyme produces less nitric oxide than it used to. Second, oxidative stress in the vessel wall increases. Reactive oxygen species, unstable molecules that damage cells, begin to neutralize the nitric oxide that ENOS does produce before it can reach the smooth muscle cells. So you are producing less, and what you do produce is being consumed before it can do its job. Research published in the journal Circulation confirmed that long-term physical activity prevents this age-related impairment in nitric oxide availability, with older adults who had maintained exercise throughout their lives showing a nitric oxide-dependent vasodilation comparable to that of much younger adults. The same study confirmed that sedentary older adults showed the characteristic decline. Source: Tadai S. et al. Physical activity prevents age-related impairment in nitric oxide availability in elderly athletes. Circulation: 2000, 101, 2896 to 2901. DOI:1.01.161/01.cir.101.25.2 The endothelium is not an abstract organ you cannot influence. It responds to specific inputs, movement, diet, and certain well-studied compounds. And the evidence that it can be partially restored even after years of decline is genuinely encouraging for anyone over 60 who feels like their circulation has plateaued. Stay with me, because the three approaches I'm about to describe are not the standard circulation advice. They target the mechanism itself, the production and preservation of nitric oxide at the endothelial level. And each one has peer-reviewed evidence behind it that is specific enough to give you confidence in what you are doing. The first approach is dietary nitrate, and specifically, the nitrate found in leafy green vegetables and beetroot. Your body has two pathways to produce nitric oxide. The first is the enzymatic pathway, ENOS, converting L-arginine. The second is a dietary pathway. Inorganic nitrate from food is converted by bacteria in your mouth and gut into nitrite, which is then further converted into nitric oxide, particularly in low oxygen environments like the ones inside your leg muscles during exertion. This dietary pathway is significant because it partially bypasses the declining ENOS pathway. Even as ENOS activity falls with age, your body's ability to convert dietary nitrate into nitric oxide through the oral gut pathway remains more intact. A randomized, double-blind crossover study in healthy older men aged 69 years on average found that acute supplementation with concentrated beetroot juice, providing 800 milligrams of dietary nitrate, improved flow-mediated dilation of the superficial femoral artery, a direct measure of leg blood vessel function, compared to nitrate-depleted placebo. The effect was specific to the leg vessels, exactly the vascular territory most affected by age-related nitric oxide decline. Source: acute dietary nitrate supplementation. Improves flow-mediated dilatation of the superficial femoral artery in healthy older males, PMC 6566150. DOI:10.3390/NU11061272. The richest dietary sources of nitrate are arugula, spinach, beetroot, celery, and lettuce. Foods that your oral bacteria begin converting to nitrite within minutes of eating them. This is why mouthwash is worth noting. Antibacterial mouthwash used before eating leafy greens significantly reduces the oral conversion step and blunts the nitric oxide benefit. If you use antiseptic mouthwash daily, this is a detail worth knowing. The second approach is curcumin, the active compound in turmeric. And I want to be specific about the evidence here because the research behind curcumin and endothelial function is more rigorous than most people realize. A randomized, placebo-controlled trial published in the journal Aging enrolled 39 healthy men and postmenopausal women aged 45 to 74 and assigned them to 12 weeks of curcumin supplementation at 2,000 milligrams daily using a specific bioavailable form called long vita or placebo. The researchers measured both resistance artery endothelial function and conduit artery endothelial function, the two complementary systems that govern blood flow in peripheral circulation. After 12 weeks, curcumin increased resistance artery endothelial function by 37%, and conduit artery endothelial function, measured as brachial artery flow-mediated dilation, by 36%. The placebo group showed no significant change in either measure, and the mechanism was confirmed. Curcumin increased the contribution of nitric oxide to endothelial function and reduced the oxidative stress that was consuming it. Source: curcumin supplementation improves vascular endothelial function in healthy middle-aged and older adults by increasing nitric oxide bioavailability. Aging, Albany, NY, 2017, 9, 1, 187 to 208. PMC 5310664. DOI:10.180.1862/aging.101149. The form matters here. Standard turmeric powder and low bioavailability curcumin preparations have shown inconsistent results in human trials because curcumin is poorly absorbed in its native form. The long vita formulation uses a phospholipid delivery system that substantially improves absorption. When discussing curcumin with your doctor, the dose and the form are both relevant to the conversation. The third approach is movement, but not movement in the generic sense that every piece of advice you have already received has told you about. Movement for endothelial function works through a specific mechanism that most people have never been told about, and that specificity changes what kind of movement matters most. When blood flows through your vessels with greater speed or turbulence, what physiologists call shear stress, the endothelial cells lining the vessel walls sense it directly. They respond to that mechanical signal by upregulating diagnose activity, producing more nitric oxide. This is the mechanism by which aerobic exercise improves endothelial function over time. Every bout of aerobic activity creates shear stress in your vessels, stimulates diagnose, and gradually trains your endothelium to produce more nitric oxide at baseline. Source: Robinson. A.T. Banks N.F. Jenkins NDM. Exercise as Vascular Medicine. Can exercise combat negative health behaviors from causing endothelial dysfunction? Excerpt Sport Movie 2025 3 4 EAD 00054. The implication is that the type and consistency of movement matters as much as the total amount. A 2019 study in Physiological Reports measuring superficial femoral artery function, the same leg artery measured in the beetroot study, found that prolonged uninterrupted sitting significantly reduced blood flow in that artery, and that movement breaks prevented that reduction. The leg vessels respond to every bout of movement as a circulation signal, and each period of sitting that follows without movement allows that signal to fade. Source: Carter, S.E. et al. Effect of different walking break strategies on superficial femoral artery endothelial function. Physiol Rep 2019, 7, 11, E14190, IDOE 10.14814/PHY 2.14190. For someone whose legs limit their walking distance, the important thing is not the distance. It is the frequency of the attempt. 5 minutes of walking 3 times across a day may do more for your endothelium than 15 minutes once, because each session creates the shear stress signal your endothelial cells need, and each period of sitting that follows without movement allows it to fade. Now, Nadine. When Nadine's approach shifted from managing symptoms to restoring signaling, 3 things changed. She added spinach, arugula, and beetroot to her meals deliberately, at least 1 serving of nitrite-rich greens at lunch and dinner without antibacterial mouthwash beforehand. She discussed curcumin with her doctor and began a bioavailable curcumin supplement at 2,000 milligrams daily. the same dose used in the published clinical trial in the Longvita formulation, and she changed the pattern of her movement. Instead of one 20-minute walk, she walked for 5 to 8 minutes 3 or 4 times across the day, including after meals when nitric oxide production from dietary nitrate is typically highest. Over 12 weeks, the change in her legs was not dramatic, but it was real. The persistent coldness in her feet eased noticeably. Not gone, but present less often and less intensely. The afternoon heaviness, which had been daily, became intermittent. Her legs, for the first time in 6 years, felt like they were responding to what she was doing rather than ignoring it. She did not add any new medications. She did not undergo any procedure. What she did was give her endothelium-specific inputs it had been missing for years, and the endothelium, which responds to inputs, responded. Here is what to take from Nadine's experience. First, talk to your doctor before adding any supplement, including curcumin, particularly if you take blood thinners, as curcumin may have mild anticoagulant properties at higher doses. The conversation matters. Bring the specific study, the dose, and the form. Second, add at least 1 serving of nitrate-rich greens to your daily meals: arugula, spinach, beetroot, celery. If you use antibacterial mouthwash, use it at a different time of day from when you eat these foods. Third, break your movement into shorter, more frequent sessions, rather than one block. After meals is particularly well-timed. Even 5 minutes of walking after eating supports the dietary nitrate conversion pathway and creates the shear stress your endothelial cells need to increase eNOS activity. Tomorrow morning, after your first meal, set a 5-minute timer and walk, just 5 minutes. That single post-meal walk starts the shear stress sequence and activates the dietary nitrate pathway at the same time. Do it once. Then notice whether your legs feel different by afternoon. Your endothelium responds to inputs that arrive consistently over weeks. And this is where consistent starts. 3 things to carry with you. 1, most age-related circulation decline is not structural. It is endothelial. The inner lining of your blood vessels produces less nitric oxide with age, and the nitric oxide it does produce is increasingly consumed by oxidative stress before it can do its job. Compression socks and leg elevation address symptoms. Nitric oxide addresses the mechanism. 2, 3 evidence-supported approaches restore nitric oxide production. Dietary nitrate from leafy greens and beetroot supplements the declining enzymatic pathway through a separate oral gut conversion pathway. Bioavailable curcumin reduces the oxidative stress that consumes nitric oxide and improves endothelial function measurably at 12 weeks. Short, frequent aerobic movement sessions create the shear stress that trains your endothelial cells to produce more nitric oxide at baseline, and also prevent the sitting-induced blood flow reduction that undoes your progress between sessions. 3, the endothelium responds to consistent daily inputs, not to single large interventions. The approach is cumulative, and it takes weeks to show results, but the research confirms it shows results. Before I go, something for next week. Today we covered what restores nitric oxide production in your endothelium. But there is a second vascular problem affecting seniors over 60 that is just as common as nitric oxide decline, and that most of the same advice fails to address. It is arterial stiffness, the gradual hardening of the large arteries that are supposed to act as pressure buffers between your heart and your peripheral circulation. When those arteries stiffen, even healthy nitric oxide levels cannot fully compensate, because the vessels themselves cannot flex the way they were designed to. Next week, I am going to show you what makes arteries stiffen after 60, what the research says you can do about it, and why it is the missing piece for many seniors whose circulation has not fully responded to everything else they have tried. Subscribe so you do not miss it, because if today gave you the mechanism behind why your circulation has not responded the way you expected, next week will give you the second piece of the same puzzle. I will see you then. Take care of those legs.